Okay, here we are. Monday night, we're back. Epic Books, discussing. So you want to talk about race? We have Richard McCrow, who's been here with us the whole time, and we've got Tommy and Angel joining us today. And I'd like everyone to introduce themselves, since we've got new people on. And Bill is taking the spring break to heart, right, Tommy? actual break during spring break. So I don't know, Richard, if you want to say a couple of words about what you're doing and why you're here, and then we'll go to Tommy and then Angel.
Well, I'm Richard McCrow. I work at Bakersfield College. I'm one of the deans of instruction, and I'm participating in this book discussion because I've got a lot to learn, and I want to get it right.
Good reason to be here. Tommy?
I'm Tommy Tucson, and I am faculty at Bakersfield College, and I'm here because I have a lot to learn as well.
Okay. Hi, my name is Angel Maurer, and my pronouns are they, she, a, and I have two hats on today. My first one is I'm the executive scheduler, office manager, LGBTQIAP2+ liaison for District 3. And I'm also the founder of the Gender Fluid Collective, which is a community-based organization that helps center and support our Black, transgender, non-binary, NB folks in the community, but also is welcoming under the umbrella as well for our BIPOC, QTPOC community. So I'm here because I love to talk about intersectionality. It's a very good education tool because people don't realize that their lives intersect at so many different layers and levels. And we all are siloed in our lives that we don't realize how our lives intersect with others.
Thank you. So my name is Letty, and I started this book discussion and wanting to be public about these conversations that we're having, and through Epic Consulting and our social media platforms, I wanted to make sure that people could feel like it's okay to be uncomfortable in these situations, in having these discussions, because we're all trying to learn. Even if the four of us are gathering here to have these conversations, it's not because we're experts by any means, but we do have experiences that we're trying to share. Richard and Bill have been very open about wanting to learn and putting themselves out there and saying, these are my experiences and how can I share them, and then how can I be more aware. And then as we're making mistakes, all of us along the way, making sure that we're not, well, I guess today is the perfect conversation, that we're not being the offender, that we're not being the oppressor, that as we're helping some, we're not offending or oppressing others. So we're in chapter 5 now. Oh, let me put my fancy ticker. There it is. What is intersectionality and why do I need it? Is the topic for today. And I did type up the definition that I took from Oluo's book. It takes up some space, but the belief that our social justice movements must consider all of the intersections of identity, privilege, and oppression that people face in order to be just and effective. And this is huge. It's a big idea. It's a big theory to kind of sit with, understand, and then put into practice. So I want to just tackle this definition as you came across it in the book and read through the chapter, and in your life, what are some things that are hitting all of these bits and pieces? Are you understanding what this means in the conversations and interactions you have with the people that you're in your work that you're serving? Anyone want to take the first?
Well, I think the understanding what intersectionality is too is also in the book on page 77. It also helps us to stay true to our values of justice and equality by keeping our privilege from getting in our way. Now, we all have different types of privilege. We all walk and live through different lenses. And by understanding that what your privilege is and how you view life and how you perceive folks will also help you uplift and center others that are marginalized as well. So we can't just keep living in these silos and not understanding the world around us and the people around us, how they intersect in our lives. So if that means you have to call out a coworker for their racist jokes at work, or how they just like minimalize people's real lived experience or real lived experience. So I speak from the lived experience lens. I can't speak for other folks. I'm a parent of a transgender teen. And so I do have I live on the cusp of being transgender through my son. I am not a transgender person. So therefore, I can't tell you what that lived experience is like. All I can do is learn and understand, try to understand it, but it's not for me to understand, it's for me to respect. So that's where, well, how you have to look at intersectionality. It's not for you to understand or try to make people understand your point of view and how you perceive it. That's not it at all. It's about respecting people's identities and gender expressions and who they are and how they live and walk through life without pushing your ideologies down their throat. You know what I mean? So that's what everybody intersects in different ways and different walks of life. So that's how I perceive intersectionality. And that's why I like having this conversation, because I at least get one person that walks away like, because I'll drop a little nugget and then they're like, well, wait a minute. Okay. And then they'll circle back and they're like, okay, remember when you said this, this, and this? Okay, this is what I took away. Oh, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Because you might have taken something away from that I haven't, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just the fact of understanding it, respecting it, and then moving on and helping others to understand that too as well.
Yes. I think that this is the kind of exercise that if we could be in a room full of people like you're describing and walk people through even their own identities and then how they intersect, and then how the person sitting next to them identifies and what that means for their privilege and their identity, the identity politics at that table and in the room and the organization that they're in. And we don't think of these things if we're not met with any kind of resistance or lack of privilege in our days. So, Richard, do you have any sort of personal experience? I don't know if
I don't know. I have a lot of questions to try and understand.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's personal experience out there with my family, but I sit there. Intersectionality, I'm going to be somewhat honest. I didn't understand the concept until I read the book, and this is the second time I've read the book, and I went through the book a second time, and I still worry a little bit that I don't quite grab the concept. And I want to look at things as like, if as a white person of privilege, I feel like, if we were scooping out privilege and giving everybody a little scoop of privilege, and then Richard gets a lot of privilege, and then a black man, well, you'll get a little bit of privilege, but not so much. But then a black gay man, we're going to take a lot of privilege away from you. Is that sort of the concept? Is that the more categories you fall in racist and sexist and other is that the concept of what we're talking about?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I like that you're trying to do like this Tetris thing with intersectionality, trying to connect the dots. And you're not going to get it on the second time. You might not even get it on the third time. It might take you a year before you completely understand what intersectionality is. And it's very intimidating, the word in itself. But, okay, so for my example, again, I'm going to speak through my lived experience. So to look at me with my son, you would assume that I'm a cisgender straight woman that was married and had a kid and probably got divorced and blah, 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 right? Because I had a kid. But I'm not. My pronouns are she, they. I'm non-binary. I'm African American. I'm femme, but I'm not masculine. I don't like the word cisgender, even though that is what my sex was at birth, because I just don't feel like it resonates with me. Now, this is my lived experience. I mean, that might confuse the crap out of you. Like, oh my God, how could you not be who you are? You're female. It has way more to do with my genitalia. It has to do with how I feel as a person, how I present in society. So all of that I just told you are intersections. I'm queer, being Black, having a kid, my lifestyle, where I work. Those are different intersectionalities of my life. So those bring along different privileges in different areas. Now, you have the privilege of probably not even being harassed when you walk in the store, or driving while white, or, you know, even if you date a Black woman or married a Black woman or whatever the case may be, you have no judgment because you are a white man in society, right? So you don't know what that lens is like, being an African American male or female, or transgender or non-binary person, just going down the street to the store to get something without being pulled over by the police saying, hey, where you going, what you doing, what you buying, why'd you buy that, well, why you're in this neighborhood, and where'd you get this car from, you can't even afford it, where do you work, you know, it's ongoing. So you have to understand what your lived experience and how your lived experience impacts other folks in some sense, and then take that knowledge and try to understand how their lives are intersecting in different ways, but just try to uplift them and understand how that sometimes they're marginalized in different areas. Like, they might not get the same promotion as you because of the color of their skin, or maybe because they're a gender, they're perceived as female. Do you know what I mean? Or you might go and try to buy a house and go to the bank and fill out an application, and then I'll get redlined because I'm African American, present as female, you know what I mean? Single parent, and I get redlined and I have to jump through hoops to get a house. So these are different intersections, and these are different privileges that everybody has. So I don't know. Intersectionality is huge. We could probably talk about this for the next week, but just understanding where you live right now, where you're at right now, and just growing upon that, and just understanding the layers of privilege that you have in so many different areas. You're not just, are you disabled? Do you know what I mean? Are you straight or queer? Do you have good credit? Do you live in a house or do you rent? Do you have to worry about putting food on the table? Do you have good medical care or do you not have medical care? So these are all privilege. Right now, being on this live feed with you is a privilege. There are a lot of folks who do not have Wi-Fi, do not have laptops, do not have smartphones, do not have access to the technologies that we have right now. So there's a whole other universe of people just carved out right now that can't even get plugged in like we do. That's a privilege in itself for all four of us. So when you say privilege, you're not saying you're born with a spoon in your mouth and you have money and you come from money. It's just, they're different types of privileges. So people, and not to target you, but white folks get just really offensive when you say privilege. Oh my God, how dare you say privilege? I'm not privileged. I was like born poor and blah, blah, blah. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with how you present in society and how society reacts to you as a person walking through life. If that makes sense. Sorry, I needed to go on a tangent.
No, it's not a tangent. It's connected to the conversation last week was, that chapter is all about, what is this privilege and why am I always being told to check it? It feeds right into this, right? And if we're only looking at it in that way, then we are limiting that lens of it's not just the privilege of, like you're saying, sitting here in this space, working where you work, being connected the way that you're connected, living where you live, because we're in a rural, like Richard and I are in a rural area. And so there are people that live in this town that don't even have what we have right this minute. And so what conversation could we have with them, right? Tommy, is there anything that you want to share on this tangent that we're going on?
I have a little different view than Angel does about privilege. Growing up in South Central LA, I saw some things that did indicate economics and did indicate money and did indicate that it was a privilege because I didn't have the privilege growing up. I gained it as I got older and worked for it, and I really had to work for it. But I really love what she said when she said respect. And I think, Rich, that's where the whole rubber meets the road, because and I can kind of talk, Angel, a little bit to Rich's background, because in the military, it's probably the most integrated organization we have in America, where people of all different races, creeds, genders, lifestyles are all in the same place together, and we got to depend on everybody. So when you look at each other, you don't really see the privilege, except there is a distinction between enlisted and officers. That is a definite privilege difference, but it's one that, and Rich has never heard this, but I remember at a base down in Georgia. Now, I'm a black man from California. So when I went to Georgia, you want to talk about intersectionality, I wasn't sure which side of the street for me to walk on, because the blacks were going to talk about me for what I did and how I talked. The white people are going to say the audacity of him to do A, B, C, and D. So you talk about intersectionality, I was all over the place. But I noticed as a young enlisted soldier, when I'd walk in a base, and Rich knows this, you have the pictures of all the people who are commanders, and you have pictures of all the sergeant majors that are in the military. Well, guess what? Want to know where the intersectionality was with that? Most of the officers that were commanding generals and officers were all white. And most of all the enlisted sergeant majors and first sergeants were all black. And I said to myself, I don't like that. I think we should have more up top. So I worked hard to get myself into that position. But the military provided a really good atmosphere for learning the distinction. And the whole bottom line was respect. As a kid growing up in LA, my brothers and friends and family, we all had different views, and we all ran in different circles, but we respected the circles of the people that we ran in. You want to talk about intersectionality? I'm black, became a cop, military officer, lived in a exclusive neighborhood in Orange County. And you want to talk about getting pulled over when I would go to work. Angel, I know the drill. And it happened to me as a cop working special operations and getting pulled over and quote unquote, hey boy, what are you doing here? I'm working. Well, we got a team badge and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a really good study. And I believe that, that privilege that we talk about, some of us have earned it, some of us have not. But, there's no mistake that I had to work harder just to be the same. There's an old expression that we say in the black community that we have to be twice as good just to be accepted. And
exactly.
I imagine, Angel, with you, it's probably triple, because my real good friend, she is the chief of police of Santa Monica, black female. And she has told me some horror stories of all of the above. So that's how I see it.
Well, let me speak to what you said. Don't get it twisted now. When I said privilege is not just money, I just meant to say there's more to it. Now, I'm right there in the boat with you. I have a military background. I'm a Marine brat. I've been on bases and lived in different houses and different states on the East Coast and the Midwest, and ended up in California. Came, very upper middle class, and then my parents divorced and went from upper middle class to food stamps, to rental places, horrible places, a nice big car to a little, what is that, gremlin, the Pinto or whatever it is. So I've had the best of both worlds, but as a parent, a single parent too, even though I was making decent money, I was still on that one paycheck away from being broke. You know what I mean? So I lived in South Central LA on 48th and 7th off Crenshaw, right out of Leimert Park. So I know what it's like to live over there. And then I
74th
moved.
and Central.
Yep, 48. Okay, so yeah, right? Then I lived on 6th and Adams over there off of 6th and Adams, where that overnight hamburger shop was always open till 2:00, and you go after the club, you go get that I was over there too, right down the street from Carl Bean House. So I know I'm from South Central LA.
Can you say Mavericks Flats?
Huh?
Mavericks Flats?
Yes. Yes, I know the spot, the Jamaican spot over on Washington Street, that market and the food. Yes, that was my spot. So no, I've come from that place, but I've also worked very hard to get to where I was when my son was in kindergarten. I lived in Laguna Niguel for 8 years. You know what I mean? Until
Wow.
So I went from Laguna Niguel to San Diego and worked my way up, and now I work for the county board of supervisors. So that's what I'm saying. Our lives intersect in so many different levels and so many different levels of our lives. So understanding where you come from and understanding that type of privilege, whether it's monetary, whether it's a identity privilege, whatever that is, just embrace that, but use that tool to help uplift and center others. That's what I was trying to say. But that's cool to know that you're from the same area. In LA though. Oh, I loved LA. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Now I feel left out. Oh.
No, it's okay.
What were we gonna say, Richard?
Well, so my question then about intersectionality is that, I'm thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and during the Black Lives Matter movement, trans Black people were sort of part of that movement and were very visible, for me as a white guy, trying to understand the Black Lives movement, and then trying to understand the movement of the Black trans people, and then really grasping the challenges that are faced there. And as Tommy was sort of talking about, is it a multitude of sort of things that are working against you in society because you're marginalized for each and every one of those ideas? And so as you start to fight through things in your life to get the things that you need, the challenge is greater because you're Black. The challenge is even multiplied greater because you're queer. The challenge is multiplied greater because you're a woman. The challenge is multiplied. So it just continues like that. Is that the concept that I'm looking at?
Yes, you're grasping it. It just compounds. It's like layer, and it's just compounding. And then when you peel back those layers, you start to see how things kind of go together, but they don't go together, but they do intersect. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just look at it as an onion and peeling back those layers of an onion.
Yeah, I think part of it too is understanding that it's not that, because Angel, you just said something right now that made it click a little bit more for me. It's not that all of these things are always there, but you're not always going to see or feel any kind of discrimination or whatever on all of those things all the time. You know, we're not walking through life always feeling that. I will tell you, probably based on how I look, that gender, like me being a woman, is going to be the first thing. I don't have an accent, but I'm Spanish was my first language. I had to learn English in school. My mom doesn't really speak English, so growing up in a Mexican American family, and my sister didn't have the same experience that I did, and I think, quite frankly, part of it is, you know, how we look a little different. So it's like the example that she gives in the book about if I'm walking down the street and something happens, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, I don't know if it's because I'm Black, you know, I don't know if it's because of the neighborhood that I'm in, or what I'm wearing or what I'm carrying. And then if they know that she's queer, does that add? That's another question, like, that you have to
think about. Exactly.
And then so when we say
what's visible, Letty, I can tell you
go with what's visible. So then when you say this happened to me, I think that's part of the reason why people don't want to believe. If they haven't experienced any of those things, it makes absolutely no sense to them that anything like that would ever happen.
Right.
Because we're saying it could be gender, it could be race, it could be single parent, it could any judgment, any judgment. But it is what people see.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do, see, this is like just talking about this, you have to talk about implicit bias and how you were raised and the different, you know what I mean, nuances of your life, how that shapes and molds your ideas about other people and other cultures and how other people move through life, right? So you already have this ideology growing up like, oh, all Asian people are techies. No, that's not true. All Black people are ghetto and ratchet. No, that's not true. All white people are racist. No, that's not true. You know what I mean? But then you have to think about, what about those kids that are coming from all these different backgrounds that have different parents, you know, a white parent, a Black parent, Indian parent, Mexican parent, you know what I mean? And their cultures intersect, you know what I mean? So you can't view somebody from the outside and just assume what they're like, and that's your implicit bias. And then your implicit bias feeds into your racism. And then your racism is encouraged by your privilege. And then your privilege intersects with the intersectionality, because now you have to kind of decentralize who you are and understand who you are and how all of this affects how you behave. So once you change your mindset, that'll change your behavior. So we can't change our behaviors unless we get to understand ourselves and who we are and actually embrace other people's lived experiences and not dismiss them. I'm sorry.
Hello, Kitty.
And not dismiss them. Oh my God. There's 3. This one is Hector. And then I have
Hi,
a big
Hector.
one. Yeah, this is Hector. Hector is curious. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so, and you can't talk about one thing without talking about the others. You know what I mean? But for this one, I really like how this book, she simplified it and she really broke it down to where folks can understand it at least a little bit and give you some nuggets to talk about. And then it would be a good book for a book club, you know what I mean, to me. And let's really talk about, this would be a book that you'd probably talk about for a couple of weeks. You couldn't just do one meeting and then move to another book. This would be like a month book, you know what I mean? Every weekend for 4 weekends, you're talking about this book because there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, and you're right about, sorry.
I'm going to follow up an Angel again because she's just kind of laying out the path, and I get to just walk right on the path that she's laying. You know, Letty, you made a really interesting comment, and I'll tell you right off the bat, and here's a question I'll ask you and I'll ask Rich. I'm sure Angel knows the answer. What is the most visible people of color in America? Out of all the different people of color, who is the most visible?
I defer to you, Richard and Letty.
Oh, Black people?
Visible.
Letty, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you're going by sight. Is that what you mean?
That's correct. So if Blacks are the most visible, if Angel and I are walking down the street, people look at us. Do you think they look at her gender or her color first?
Oh, absolutely. Color. Like, we don't know anything else.
That's right. So the intersectionality, that's 2 of them right off the bat. And Letty, trust me, I've seen you in person. They're not going to see you as female first. They're going to see you as Hispanic first and then concurrently female. That's how it basically goes. You might be treated differently because of that, but that's what is seen first. And the stereotype, the implicit unconscious behavior that goes with what people see is the implicit bias that we all have to deal with one way, shape, or another. I mean, even Rich, they look at him and implicitly, oh, okay, here we go. Here's another white dude. We just can imagine how he's going to behave and what he's going to do. That's unconscious. And nobody knows if that's true or not.
I think that all the time.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put this next. Well, I can't decide which one to put. Let's do this one. This is one of the quotes that I wanted to focus on because I think the word forces is what causes a lot of that the conflict, right? Like we're being so combative because intersectionality forces people to interact with, listen to, and consider people they don't usually interact with, listen to, or consider. So as we're sitting here having this conversation, we're forcing ourselves to think if we haven't had these conversations, if we're not thinking about these things, like Richard is admitting, having difficulty maybe imagining what that's like. Having this kind of conversation where you use this word, this intersectionality word, and define it for people and have conversations about it. We say this every week. Once you understand it, it's hard. It's hard to go back. You can't unknow these things. You can, but then you're living a life that's, you're hidden from the truth. I feel like people who live, once they know, are trying to live a life where they pretend that they don't understand or they don't want to know people's journeys or what intersectionality means, for example, that it's harder to, they're having heart attacks, that their blood pressure is through the roof, their weight is off the charts. It's like you can't be healthy once you know these things. Once you know them, you can't unknow them. And if you're purposely being willfully ignorant about this, once people present this information to you, how do we interact? How do we force people into that without forcing them into it? Because that's where the combat starts, right? You can't have those conversations.
Right. So
I'm thinking about
it's kind of like you said about oppression. Like if you don't embrace it, then you feel like you're oppressing it. You're being an oppressor. Does that make sense? So now that you know, and you don't speak on it or do anything to help, you have that guilt of, I'm contributing to that oppressive behavior, which you kind of are.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I don't want to put Richard on the spot. That's not true. I want to. I'm lying. I totally want to.
I doubt that.
Because this line goes right into that because I know that I've had to learn, and we all are in whatever ways, because there's so many different pieces that make up a person. There's all these different identities that make up a person and their experience for themselves and their family and their community. So if we talk about higher education a little bit, if you're not embracing it as a campus, in the policies that you're planning, how are you imagining that whatever policies you're creating, or if you're making changes, if you're not making changes, how is this going to impact students who are coming to you for an education?
That's a good one.
Is that towards me?
Well, there's two of you here. Either one of you. But I'm picking on you because you're at a upper management position. Tommy, you're also in charge of dealing with the training police at your campus, so that it might be something that you want to answer also. Okay.
Well, I'll take my sort of hit at it, and then you guys can beat me up. What I'm thinking of is this year has a little white fragility starting to steam up here.
Yeah, it is. I was about to say, I didn't want to bring it up because people get so hurt or butthurt when I say white fragility. It's like, that's when you lose the whole conversation. So I'm glad you brought it up.
But
it's okay. This is a safe place.
I can tell you that as I learn personally, as I go through these kinds of conversations, and during the Black Lives Matter movement and the discussions that I had with my wife, and I just said that I'm not going to be quiet. At the very least, I can open up and learn and ask questions and be in the meetings that that one is people of color aren't represented extremely well, especially in the circles that I sit in the leadership circles, but listening out loud. And then, but as I talk about intersectionality, then I'm thinking I have to, there's no one finite stop point. There's continually building awareness about all people around me and with me, and making sure that as I take steps to push the things that need to change, that I really take that action. And that's for all, and keep always being vigilant in what I do to ensure that we're not leaving anybody on the margins, that we're pulling people in and bringing people up and lifting them up. So that's where I sit now. How well I do, check with me in a year and we'll see, how much has actually changed. But I'm working at it.
No, that's good. I think now that you know and you go into those spaces, and if you have the opportunity and you have the power to do that or influence change as far as on the policy level or even on the curricular level, on how students are treated in and out of the classroom and on campus, then do whatever you can. And if you don't know what to do, then I'm sure there's somebody there that's thinking, having the same mindset as you too, and you would be able to figure out how to implement those changes. I think everybody's kind of like thinking about, how can we implement these changes and actually make them come to fruition? So you're not alone in that mindset as far as what can I do?
I will say one of the benchmarks I've always used from when I was in the military, when I became a policeman, and then when I went to the college to work. One of the benchmarks I used was to look at how many people of color I see in positions of authority in the organization. That tells you what type of organization you're getting into or you're in. And I will tell you that, and this is normal throughout whatever organization, the higher you go, the fewer and fewer and fewer people of color will be in the position, period. Regardless what they say, regardless of we're going to do equity, we're going to do representation. Okay, fine. Look at your hierarchy, and your hierarchy will tell the tale.
Yeah. Like I'm always been, as I noticed, as I progressed in my career or whatever I did, I was always the one Black person. But then I fall into that category of, well, you're not black, but you're not white either. So I'm in that limbo of being multiracial, where I'm not Black enough for Black folks, but I'm not white enough for white folks, but I am Black enough to be that one token in that department. You know what I mean? To say they met their status quo. So yeah, I do the same thing whenever I go into a job or accept a job or go into a different department. It's really, my heart drops because you're usually only the one of two. And then if you're two, then that usually that other one leaves, and then you're stuck there with all these expectations that these people have of you as a Black person. Do you know what I mean? And then you have to perform above and beyond in like tenfold of your white counterpart just to get the same privileges or the same perks or the same recognition or support as your white colleagues. And it's just, it is, and it's still, and it's been on for years. It has not yet changed, and I'm glad you brought that up because we need to change that. I mean,
and heaven forbid, you're human. You make some mistakes. You may not be at the level that they expect you to be, but that self-fulfilling prophecy, all eyes are on you, and it's kind of like, if you don't get it right, I'm not putting any more that look like you in that position.
Exactly. Right. You're carrying the weight of everybody that's Black coming after you to get that position. Yes. You ruined it for everybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yep. So, yeah.
So it's that the tokenism across the board. I mean, organizations right now are hiring like crazy for like diversity officers and DI,
racial equity, inclusion people.
I mean, here where we
look
are
at
in
how
Kern
many of
County,
them are people of color.
well,
It's usually shades of brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, it's very, very true. It's like you're saying about, especially if you're biracial, it's like you're walking this line, and you can't say or do something in a certain, or maybe it's, and we can have this conversation again with the when we come to the hair chapter, but it's like the hair has to look a certain way. You can't be too one way or the other because you'll disappoint one side of the other.
Hair.
Have
we'll have
that good
to say
hair,
that.
right?
We'll have
Right,
to say
Angel?
that.
That good hair.
Yeah. Yeah. The good hair, bad hair, curly hair, coily hair, straight hair. Oh yeah. No, don't get me started with the hair. Can I touch your hair? No. Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get to that conversation. But visually, I mean, if we're talking about like just what is visible, that's one of the things, right? And if, like Tommy, if the mistake is something, even if I was going to say if it's really visible, even if it isn't, it could be a minor thing. But it's like you've disappointed us. You know, we're just so disappointed because we gave you we gave you this chance.
Yeah.
And then you're under a microscope. At that point, everything you say and do is heavily scrutinized more than some of your colleagues. And you can call it whatever you want. You want to talk about the essence of intersectionality. Fortunately, there's people, and I hate to do this, but fortunately, there's people like Rich that help balance out so much of the others and how they're going to treat you and behave in that unconscious manner.
Yeah, and that implicit, or what they say, implicit bias. So I have an issue with that too. It's like it kind of gives people the excuse to have certain types of behavior. So I have an issue with the term implicit bias too. But that's a whole other conversation. But I see that Richard's wheels are spinning in his head. He's just like, what are you thinking about, Richard?
What am I thinking?
About the pressure now.
I think
Richard's one of the good ones.
Oh.
Sorry, I had to go on.
I sort of want to go back to the book because my wheels are turning about intersectionality and some of the things Tommy, some of the things everybody has said, and sort of tying this together is more and more as I sort of watch, there is change happening. But the benefit of that change are people of color, but lighter skinned people of color are starting. This is what I'm seeing. This is only, I don't have data to back this up, but and it feels like people of color, usually lighter skinned people of color, usually are not Black, are getting into positions of leadership. And then there's the feeling of, well, the tokenism. I can point to leaders at the campus and say, well, she's from India, or she's Mexican, and then we're sort of checking the box in this weird sort of way to prove we're not a racist campus. Now, I don't think Bakersfield College is any more racist than other colleges, but Bakersfield College is a racist campus. We've come across things that we've discovered as we talk more and more. And the thing that worries me is that there's been a lot of talk, but the action and changes and breaking things down, you're fighting a fight that well, you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm starting to realize as a white man, Johnny come lately, that we need to break things down. And so the concept of the fear of leaving Blacks behind because we promoted Hispanics or Latinx, or we promoted people of color from Asia, but I still see a force that the darker your skin, we're going to leave you behind. And that worries me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. And so that's where you come in. That's where you use your privilege, you use your position, and you still continue to have these conversations like we need to hire more African Americans and not Asians or people that pass, or, you know, and then you don't have to say it like that, but you know what I mean? You can push for a certain status quo of African Americans working and or being brought on board, whatever your process is for your school. Do you know what I mean? But that's where you use your voice and your platform to constantly have those conversations, because if you don't say anything, then you're silent and saying it's okay, because your silence is strengthening them. You know what I mean? So you don't feel bullied out of not being vocal. Do you know what I mean? Because the more you are vocal about it and the more that you are outwardly supporting and being there for folks, that's going to resonate with some other folks who are too scared to speak up. And then you start to pull numbers of people like, okay, I'm really want to support you on this. So you're saying things that people are probably feeling and just don't want to speak on it.
Yeah.
He does speak up, and it's kind of reassuring. The only problem is when he speaks up and he looks around, he's out there on that branch and that tree limb by himself.
Yeah.
And it really can cause some political organizational repercussions. And I see that, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I know you put yourself on a limb probably when you do that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about in the last few weeks about what that means for white people. Because Bill Moseley, who is usually co-hosting with Richard, well, we have a joke. I'm just going to go ahead and say it because I think it's a great title. We have this idea that a good name for a podcast, or this show would be, two white guys talking about things they have no business talking about. And I think that's kind of the case probably in those meetings, like in meetings in a higher ed institution, elementary school, high school, any education. I mean, I can't imagine. I was thinking about this today. What is happening in my local city council meetings? There are no vigils. There are no news articles in these rural towns where we're at in the Central Valley. The conversations aren't happening in public. They're not happening in public. So if somebody brings it up, if a person of color brings it up, then it's, that's not, that's just, you're worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
Town's not worried about it. That's you worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
If a white person brings it up, it's like, why are you bringing it up? Why is this your problem?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like having to put yourself out there and being brave. And Bill always talks about, I have to give up so others can have more. And it's, we've had these white savior conversations, and that's not what he's talking about. But it kind of is, maybe. I mean, if you're willing to lose a little clout, maybe, I don't know, street cred. I guess you'd have more street cred if you actually, put yourself out there. I think it's hard. It's really hard for people in professional spaces. Because even if they haven't been bullied, they feel like it's coming. Mm-hmm. And there's already a line drawn between people of color and non-people of color. Mm-hmm. So it's obvious, those people speak up and they get in trouble. If I speak up, then I'm going to be on that side of the line, right? I can't imagine how hard that must be. I'm not in that position. I guess I feel like I can say whatever the hell I want, whenever the hell I want to say it, maybe a little bit. I don't know. But this is creating a space like this, like saying, hey, what the hell? Let's just have this conversation. You guys say what you need to say, and let's read this book, and let's talk about these things. And if we go off the rails, that's fine, because these conversations go off the rails a lot. And I want people to hear from us as we're making mistakes and figuring out what we should do next. And I don't want to be a bully, and I don't want to be bullied.
Yeah.
So how do we do that together?
You have to just continue to have conversations, Richard. Like, if you're in a space where you think you can have that conversation with somebody, have that conversation. Do you know what I mean? If you can create a space at work where it's a support, not a support group, but just like a group, like you could create a book club or something, you know what I mean? Create a chat room online and invite folks in, or do a podcast like this and invite your colleagues into circle to say, hey, this is a safe space to ask all those questions you wanted to talk about at work without feeling, you know, you're inappropriate. I tell people all the time that, yeah, you know, you won't know if you're inappropriate unless you ask, and then you get feedback on it, right? And then some stuff you do know is inappropriate and you just don't say anything. But if you truly don't know what's inappropriate, you need to be able to talk to somebody so they can at least give you honest feedback on what that is. So continual conversation, that's all I can really say, because that's even like in the chapter, it says you have to just open yourself up and listen to those identities and experiences that are different from yours. And as long as you continue to do that, these conversations will continue.
Yeah, she's really good about that in the book. When you read it, you look at the last couple of paragraphs, and it really hammers it home what you just said. It really does. And I actually highlighted those last few bullet points. You too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my highlights now. Yep.
Because I just said, wow.
This is really good.
And I think one of the, nothing we've talked about is new to me. Nothing we've talked about, I have an experience for decades, not years.
Yes.
Decades.
Decades. Exactly. I'm right there with you.
And I see that the pendulum, a little bit is moving. I see it starting to push that rock up the hill a little bit. And this is good. Letty, this is great to see, because, and Rich has heard me say this, in that I was in that group of folks, Angel, at the college. And when you fall out of grace, you know, you fall hard, and they will not let you forget about falling out of grace. But, you know, a fellow colleague can fall out of grace, and they'll pat him on the back and says, okay, let's put you someplace else, or let's not have this do it again. But if it's somebody of color, dark color, oh my goodness, you're between the crosshairs. Oh
yeah, or you're set as the example. You know what I mean? You're set as the example, and that's just not, no, that's unacceptable. I think a lot of the stuff was sincere when we started this, back in March, of making folks accountable of their actions, especially the police, when George Floyd died in March. And then it kind of waned, and it still waned. And a lot of it now is a performative on social media. Anybody can go on there and be a social justice warrior and post stuff and say stuff. But what are you really doing behind lines? Are you having those conversations? Are you reaching out to those who are marginalized, or just struggling in life that you know, and seeing what they need, and what if they need to even just talk? You know what I mean? What are you doing other than sitting on behind a screen and posting stuff and having these performative conversations? That's not doing shit. I'm sorry. You know what I mean?
No,
a lot of it is performative.
And we're going to use the police as an example next week.
Yeah.
In our discussions, because, you know, me being a 30-year policeman and being Black, I got some stories to tell you. You think it's bad from the outside looking in. You should be, you know, the Uncle Tom, the N-word syndrome is absolutely off the charts. And yet you're expected to be one of them, and you're not, because they never see you as that. So
they'll never see you as an equal. It's like a KKK boys club to some level. You know what I mean? Not all of them are like that, but the majority of them are like that, on a power trip. They couldn't have any power, any other aspects of their life. So they have to go and be a police officer. They can wield that power and that anger and that hate, you know, and it's horrible.
And here's my last comment on that is, we have a course that we designed at Bakersfield College to bridge the gap, the racial divide between police and the communities of color. And we've opened this up to the community, and I can't get police officers to get in the class. And we have some of the largest agencies in the state of California that will not sign up in the class. And some of our administrators don't understand why me as a fellow cop can't get these other cops in the class.
Because they don't want to be under the gun. They know it's going to be a shitstorm when they do come in that class, because people are going to be very honest and very frank, and they don't want to deal with it. They can't deal with it. They don't know how. So they just avoid it. You know what I mean? So yeah, we could talk about this forever.
Well, that performative allyship or
performative allyship. Yeah.
To, you know, being an ally in any way. I mean, just you going around, if you're going around saying that you're an ally, I mean, come on, like that's like,
you have to earn your allyship.
You don't get to decide. You don't get to decide.
Right. The community or your folks will say, this is an ally. You just don't come out and say, hey, I'm an ally. You know, I'm this, I'm that. No. Okay. What have you done?
So it's, what's that?
Oh, no, I'm saying I declared myself an ally. I have an ally sticker on my car, and
but you are an ally because you've probably proven yourself many times that you're an ally without even realizing it. So your friends have already deemed you an ally. That's different than just coming out the gate saying, "Hey, I'm an ally," and haven't done anything for your friends or of color or those that are marginalized or just struggling.
Yeah. I think oh, go ahead.
No, I'm not going to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Tommy made a comment about the difficulty in getting police officers to come to the transformational policing class, and then leadership not understanding the dilemma there. And I think that leadership often does things like that, like in hiring a faculty, you know, just declaring we want to hire a more diverse faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And then given the order, you know, to a dean or a department chair, go out and hire diverse faculty. And then you sit in a selection committee and you look around and everybody's white. And yourself, what the heck did I get myself into?
Exactly.
And so, but then when you start to challenge the system, like doing things of, I want to intentionally put in our advertisement that we are actively looking to hire people of color, and HR saying outright, "Oh, you can't do that." Like that puts us at risk. And I'm just thinking, well, how the heck am we supposed to do this? And to me, I think Bill hit the nail on the head last week when he was talking. He said, if we truly value diversity, which means to be diverse, you know, we have to hire more people of color because we value the experience of people of color, then we have to actively advertise for people of color.
Exactly.
And say that because this is part of your experience, your degree and your background experience working at a college and your experience as a person of color. And so why can't we market those things when we're looking for new faculty? I don't know the answer, but boy, there's a lot of people that throw in a lot of roadblocks when you start talking like that. So
makes them uncomfortable.
Because, you know, I'm having an epiphany over here, and Tommy, you guys are going, yeah, Rich, yeah.
Good job. Gold stars. Should we start? I'm gonna start giving out gold stars every time. This is so this is not appropriate. I'm gonna start handing out gold stars.
I'm glad there's sort of a yellow tint so you don't see how bright red I am right now.
I think a big problem that can be confusing for a lot of people in their organizations is, you know, when there are announcements or statements that are put out, but then there's no follow through, and there's no, I don't want to keep picking on colleges, but if if they, universities across the United States put out statements on their websites. They made big deals out of it. Organizations, corporations, Nike, all these people in these places. And then some of them followed up and are following through. And they're putting their money where their statement is. They're changing policies on how they hire, how they promote. They're changing the way they deliver their products. They're really making changes, and the majority of them are not. So this idea, like the quote that I have up, where she says, it's not enough for you to just say, I believe in this. It's like believing in Santa Claus, I guess. Mm-hmm. Who cares? Who cares if you believe in it? What are you doing? It's like, Angel, what you said. What are you doing now that you know, what are you doing in your position of privilege, in your work, in your community, in your family? Are there things that you can make a difference, and quietly, right? You're not out in the street with sparklers talking about, I donated, or I served, or, that's part of it. That's the performative aspect that really ruins it for a lot of people. Yeah. If it's not, picture it didn't happen, this is for Instagram, I got to make sure that, I got to make sure people know that I'm being my best ally. I don't know. It's pissing me off.
I understand what you're saying. Yep.
All right. We have what is this? Oh, Sally made a comment. Washington has less than 2% of people of color. Oh, Washington State? Is this where you're from, Richard? Is this what she's talking about? Washington State. This is really interesting because Terry Givens, who wrote the book Radical Empathy, talks a lot about growing up in Spokane. And actually I have her book right here. If you guys want to read a different one, there's that one. And so she talks about that, raising her kids and the experiences she had growing up in that kind of environment. And, what's it like when no one understands around you, when you're speaking up, but you can't make any headway if you're not the person in charge. Okay, I want to put Angel, I didn't get the actual name of the website, but I wanted to put the Gender Fluid Collective up here. Do you want to talk a little bit about what this
the Gender Fluid Collective? Okay, yeah. So the Gender Fluid Collective started when my son transitioned when he was 15. He's now 18, about to be 19. And he was a sophomore. He was a sophomore, just became a sophomore in high school. And he knew for how old is he? 10 years? 5 years? 10 years? He knew for a while that he was transgender. And he did not have access to research it until I gave him a cell phone, my old Apple iPhone, because he was a latchkey kid. So I'm a single mom. So when he was like 10, 5 years, yeah. So when he was 10, I gave him his first iPhone. And so when he'd get home from school, he'd research his identity and found a YouTube video that resonated with him, that helped him understood how he felt. You know what I mean? Because it's hard for kids to put into feelings how he felt. So he was a female at birth. He was always different though. He always wore boys' clothes. I was a tomboy, so it didn't really like raise any flags for me. It didn't matter because I really feel like kids are a blank slate and you just let them be who they are, what they want to be. By the time they hit puberty, they'll know who they are. Do you know what I mean? They'll know, it'll come together. It all comes together in the end, just like some talk sooner than others, So he said, hey, Mom, I think I'm transgender. I'm like, okay. And I didn't know as a parent what to do with that because that was so far off my radar. You know what I mean? You're so engulfed in working and coming back and feeding and doing all these things that you do for as a parent that's the last thing you think of is your child coming to you and saying, hey, I want to switch genders. Right? So being the parent that I am, I'm different. I'm not one of those traditional parents. I was just like, okay, so what can I do? What can I do? Because I love my son unconditionally. There's no parent handbook. There's no right way to do that. So I really felt like, okay, I need to do that. But I went through a mourning period. Like I was shocked. Then I was numb. And then I cried. Every time you mention his dead name, I cried because it's like I'm losing a daughter and gaining a son. And you have all these expectations for a daughter, like marriage and first heartbroken and boyfriend and getting pregnant and prom. You know what I mean? You have all these, when you have kids, you already have everything mapped out for them. So I was in a mourning stage, like I was losing my daughter. And now that I look at it and I look back, it's like I raised a daughter and I'm raising a son, and now I raised a beautiful young adult. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it didn't matter what his gender was. It was the fact that he was my son. He was beautiful. He was amazing. I never had any issues with him. And I love him from the moon to back. You know what I mean? Because he has actually helped me grow as a person by realizing that love has so many different facets to it, and you'd be amazed how you push yourself to make sure that you take care of your loved ones, you know, and especially your kids. So I founded the Gender Fluid Collective because there weren't any spaces for us to go into for support, you know, just like talking now, you know what I mean? All the spaces were white, and they were wonderful, but they were all white, and you know what I mean? So we'd have to like explain our language and code switch and what does that word mean about, you know what I mean? Our lifestyles are completely different. So we couldn't even relate on just the basic things like food prep and foods and, you know, different things and vacations. Like, what's that? I don't go on vacation. You know, I can barely afford to go to Costco and splurge at Costco, let alone go on a vacation. You know what I mean? So it just didn't jive. So I created these spaces at Malcolm X Library and in North County for us to meet. And that just evolved into resources because then people were like, well, hey, what did you do to get your son on this? And what doctor do you use? And did you have a psychologist? You know what I mean? So it turned into resources, just connecting the dots. And here I am 4 years later. My son's a young adult, thriving. He drives. He has his own job. He has a girlfriend for almost 2 years now. She knew him prior to his transition, so it wasn't like a shock or anything. His friends accepted him, his school accepted him. I started doing stuff in the unified school districts, like educating administrators and having conversations with counselors and GSAs and GSA advisors, and it just like flourished into this huge entity. And look at me now. Now I'm the liaison for the whole District 3 of the County of San Diego. Do you know what I mean? So that's how Gender Fluid started, and that's how it transitioned into my current position as and with the county board of supervisors, just doing inclusive language and just guidance and consulting and trying to make sure that I center and uplift the community, but primarily Black, trans, queer, non-binary kids, you know what I mean, in the school systems and those who transition into young adults. So it's been a journey, you know, and I've done it out of my own pocket. You know, I get donations lately when Black Lives Matter started last year. Then that's when I started getting some donations. But prior to that, I worked a full-time job so I could do this work. And then I left that work at UCSD and took my retirement and spent it completely on the community. And so now I got to go back to work so I could do the same thing. So thus I started working again, and my paycheck truly goes to the community. I don't live in a sticks and bricks. I live in an RV, so I don't have to pay rent. And literally my income goes back into the community. The only thing I have is my car. That's it. And my car and my RV. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to do this work.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
I wanted to make sure that we got this part of the conversation in because, you know, that people knew that these kinds of organizations exist. And then I wanted you to say, you know, because you're in San Diego. So that's a lot of what maybe people don't understand about living in certain communities. Chrissy Norris comes on sometimes and we talk about, you know, she's like, well, I grew up and there's like white people everywhere. So it's like that kind of, I'm growing up in going to school. My kids are going to school in these neighborhoods and we're having different experiences than, you know, white families and my experience growing up is different. So I think living in different parts of the state, the country, but even in our state, informs a lot of those experiences. Tommy, I'm sorry that we're keeping you over if you need to take off. We understand. We're going to close up. I just wanted to make sure I got that out there.
Thanks a lot, Letty. And Angel, you're a rock star. I commend you for what you're doing with your son, your family, the whole situation. And this is just awesome. It's kind of really refreshing to hear you speak the way you speak about those things that are near and dear to your heart. And Letty, you always bring such great guests, and I want to thank you again as I check out.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
Bye, Tommy.
But I wanted to put this information up there because I know that there are places, I said this last week, if you want to donate, if you want to get involved, there's always a place, there's always an organization, there's always families that are in need, and this is one. So I wanted to make sure we could highlight it before.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I just right now we can't have contact. So what I do, I have this Loving Body program where there's a lot of people who need binders and just transitional items to be 100% themselves. So what I do, I did a pin fundraiser recently, so I was able to buy some binders for some folks and send them out to them directly from GC2B, because binders are expensive, especially if you're 15 years old and your parents don't understand what a binder is, and they really need it because it's like a mental health issue. If you have like different things that don't match how your inside is, it can cause mental health, problems. So they need those items, even, and they're expensive. So I do donations, and then when I get low, then I do another fundraiser, and you know what I mean? And I give as much as I can until I have no more and I start all over again. Yeah.
And we'll, this information will be here, and I'll share it in all of our social media posts too after this. I'll put the website up there so people can help. This is all important. It's all important. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really cool that, you have this collective, but then it's really cool that you're able to do that kind of work at the county level, that even exists, right? That's something that they thought was important enough. It's amazing.
Exactly. So it gives us a voice. And this is what I mean. It's like, I always tell folks, do something, and I don't talk just the talk, but walk the walk. And I know that I want to change things on the policy level. And the only way I could do that is if I put myself in a situation where I can influence policy advisors to write policy around it. So that's what I'm doing. Hopefully in the next year, you'll see some policies come up for the queer community, especially our trans and non-binary, our Black trans women of color, to protect them, our Indigenous women that are disappearing, you know what I mean, our human trafficked kids in foster homes. I mean, there's so many different things I want to do, and it's like, I don't even know where to start.
Well, I think you do. So we can follow your lead in a lot of ways when it comes to that, especially in your area. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to put up next week's, where am I? Sorry, I got lost there for a second. Next week, Tommy will join us again, and we'll talk about Chapter 6, Is Police Brutality Really About Race? And to me, this is the same as the very first question we asked. Is it always really about race? The answer is yes. We could just skip Chapter 6. Just kidding. We won't. I did want to, so that'll be next week. And then just as a reminder, please, how did everyone celebrate Women's History Month? I've been posting on the EPIC social media for EPIC Consulting, highlighting different women, historical figures, just so that we don't forget. And it's like, a monthly, just like with Black History Month, it's not over just because, March 31st comes and goes, you guys. So just think about these things. I'll throw my website up there. Just if anyone wants to look at more of the stuff that we're doing, you can go to this website and check that stuff out. Thank you so much, Angel, for joining us tonight. We went a little bit over, but I appreciate so much what you've shared. Richard, you as well. And Angel, we will definitely see you back. I forgot what chapter it is, but when we talk about here.
It was nice meeting you, Richard. Thank you, Letty. I so appreciate this. And Richard, anytime you have any questions, please, let's dice it. Let's chop it up. Text me, call me. Let's have a conversation. I'd love to talk to you.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to close out the broadcast. See you guys next week.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.